3 years ago, my life took a dark turn that I still cannot shake. Before you assume I am exaggerating or seeking attention, let me assure you, this was real. I had a stalker. At 18, freshly an adult, I worked at a small Domino's to cover my car payments while figuring out my future. The job was nothing special, but it was steady. I had been there for about 6 months when everything began. That night, I was on shift with my boss, assistant manager, and a few co-workers. My shift started at 4 in the afternoon and ran until midnight, closing duty. About an hour in, a man parked his white truck outside and walked in. Since I was at the counter, I greeted him and asked if he had placed an order. He confirmed, gave me his name, and I checked the system. His food was not ready yet, so I let him know it would be a few minutes. I am only 5'2", so most people seem tall to me, but this man was enormous, easily 6'4". He looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, heavy-set, white, and clad in a Wendy's uniform. Trying to be polite, I asked if he worked at the Wendy's across the street, mentioning that I used to work there myself. He smiled in a way that sent a strange chill down my spine. "Shame," he said, his tone dripping with something I could not quite place. "Wish you still worked there, for my sake." That was odd. His voice had a flirtatious edge, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I forced a polite smile and continued some light small talk before handing him his order and wishing him a good night. Half an hour later, the phone rang. I picked it up, answering in my usual cheerful tone, "Thank you for calling Domino's, this is Emily. How may I help you?" A slow, deliberate voice responded. "Oh, the cute redhead who just helped me out?" My stomach twisted. My earlier suspicion about his intent was now an undeniable reality. He asked for my number, his voice disturbingly smooth. I refused, keeping my words firm yet professional, before hanging up. My fingers trembled as I placed the phone back on its cradle. I immediately reported the call to my boss and assistant manager. They both listened intently, my boss even remarking, "Not to be harsh, but you barely look 16. That guy sounds like a creep." Their understanding helped, but my nerves still buzzed with unease. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he had just been awkward. Maybe. Hours passed. At around 10 that night, I spotted the same white truck parking outside. My breath hitched. He was back. I turned to my assistant manager, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's him." Without hesitation, she grabbed my arm and pulled me into the back office, ensuring I was hidden from view. My boss went to the counter to intercept him. Through the office window, a one-way mirror, I could see the man scanning the store, searching for me. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I pressed against the wall, willing myself invisible. My assistant manager, a sturdy woman with a no-nonsense attitude, wrapped an arm around me. "You're okay," she whispered. "He's not getting to you." At the counter, my boss did not mince words. "Look, man, she's not interested. You need to leave." The man's expression contorted into something monstrous. Anger twisted his features before he turned on his heel and stormed out. We heard the screech of tires as he peeled out of the parking lot, leaving a burnt rubber stench behind. I exhaled sharply, my entire body sagging with relief. My boss returned, his eyes filled with concern. "Take a minute. Clean up if you need to. If you want to leave early, you can." My assistant manager stayed by my side, cracking jokes in an attempt to lighten the mood. But the tension in my chest refused to release. Then the phone rang. My assistant manager answered, and as she listened, her entire posture stiffened. "Oh, hell no," she growled. I blinked. "What?" She slammed the phone down and shot up from her seat, her taser already in hand. Without another word, she stormed to the front door. "Wait! What's going on?" I called after her, but she was already outside. I rushed to the window just in time to see her standing in the parking lot, taser crackling menacingly. The white truck, now circling the building, suddenly accelerated and disappeared down the street. I grabbed my phone and called my dad. He was across the street at a bar, enjoying a casual Friday night game of darts. He picked up instantly, his voice warm with familiarity. "Dad, I need you to come to my work. Now." My voice shook. "There's this guy, he's been watching me. Waiting for me." There was a beat of silence, then his tone hardened. "I'll be right there." Minutes later, my dad arrived. He handed me his car keys. "Take my car. I'll drive yours. If that bastard knows what you drive, he won't be able to follow you." I did as he said, and the drive home was mercifully uneventful. But that night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every shadow outside my window sent my imagination spiraling. And it did not stop there. For the next month, he would park near my car and sit there for hours. Just waiting. When I stopped leaving while he was there, he changed tactics. He began circling the parking lot instead, his truck a constant presence in the periphery of my vision. 3 months later, it finally ended. No more sightings. No more phone calls. No more waiting. But the damage was done. To this day, I carry a knife everywhere I go. I never leave a night shift alone. I refuse to be caught off guard again. I no longer work at that Domino's, but the memory lingers. The fear still lurks in the corners of my mind. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I learned that the hard way. And I will never ignore my gut again. Even though the sightings had stopped, I could not shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching. I tried to convince myself that it was over, that I could move on, but paranoia had already rooted itself deep inside me. Every time I walked to my car, I scanned the parking lot for that familiar white truck. Every unfamiliar vehicle on my street sent my pulse racing. I found myself growing more withdrawn, more cautious. I avoided making eye contact with strangers. My once bubbly personality dulled, replaced by an ever-present sense of unease. The world no longer felt safe. It did not help that my nightmares had become relentless. I dreamed of the truck idling outside my house, headlights off, an unseen figure inside just waiting for me to step outside. I dreamed of footsteps behind me, of heavy breathing just inches from my ear. And sometimes, I dreamed of him catching me. Months passed, and I did my best to resume a normal life, but deep down, I knew I was different now. Changed. I started keeping my phone in my hand whenever I walked alone. I learned to memorize escape routes in case I needed to run. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, always searching for potential threats. Then, one evening, just as I had begun to believe I was safe, it happened again. I had picked up a closing shift at my new job, a small family-owned diner across town. It was around 11 at night when I finally left, exhausted from a long shift. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few cars belonging to the overnight staff at the gas station next door. I approached my car, unlocking it with my key fob, when I heard it, the sound of tires rolling slowly over pavement. My heart leaped into my throat as I turned my head, and there it was. The white truck. My body locked up in pure terror. I had not seen it in months. I had started to believe he had given up, moved on. But now, here it was, crawling through the parking lot like a predator stalking its prey. I forced my legs to move, yanking my car door open and throwing myself inside. My hands trembled as I locked the doors and started the engine. I barely had time to put the car in reverse before the truck pulled into a space at the far end of the lot, its engine idling. I did not hesitate. I backed out so fast my tires screeched, and I floored it out of the lot, speeding onto the main road. My eyes flicked to my rearview mirror, dreading what I would see. The truck was following me. I could hardly breathe as I navigated the streets, my mind racing. I knew I could not go home. If he did not already know where I lived, I was not about to lead him there now. Instead, I made a split-second decision and veered toward the police station a few miles away. I ran every red light on the way there, my pulse pounding in my ears. As I turned onto the road leading to the station, I glanced at the mirror once more. The truck was gone. Vanished. I did not stop driving until I was in the police station parking lot, my hands still gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sat there for several minutes, trying to steady my breathing, trying to convince myself that I was finally safe. But I knew better now. It was not over. Not yet. I spent nearly an hour in that parking lot, my breathing uneven, my mind racing. I debated whether to go inside and report him, but what could I really say? That a man in a white truck had followed me for a few miles. That months ago, he had stalked me at my old job. There was no proof, just my word against nothing. No crime had technically been committed, not one that they would take seriously. So I sat there, waiting, watching, hoping that the truck would not reappear. When I finally felt composed enough, I left. Instead of driving home, I went to a friend's house, making random turns along the way, checking my mirrors obsessively to make sure I was not being followed. For the next few weeks, I did everything I could to stay unpredictable. I changed my work schedule when I could, varied my routes home, and even had friends walk me to my car at night. The paranoia never left me, but the truck did not return. At least, not that I saw. I started to believe that maybe he had finally given up. Then one evening, as I was locking up the diner alone, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "You look different with your hair up." The blood drained from my face. My hair had been down all night, until just now, when I tied it back while cleaning up. My hands trembled as I typed back. "Who is this?" No response. I turned off the lights and hurried to the door, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The parking lot was mostly empty, just my car and one other vehicle, an old sedan parked near the back. I rushed to my car, scanning my surroundings as I unlocked it and slid inside. I locked the doors immediately and started the engine, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, my breath catching in my throat. The sedan's headlights flashed on. I could not see the driver's face, but I knew. It was him. I slammed my foot on the gas, peeling out of the lot without a second thought. The sedan followed. Not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to let me know he was there. He was toying with me. I took a sharp right turn onto a busier street, hoping the traffic would slow him down, but he stayed close. Panic twisted in my gut. I could not go home. I could not go to a friend's house. He could not know where I lived. Then I spotted it, a crowded gas station up ahead. I veered into the lot without signaling, nearly clipping another car as I pulled up beside a row of parked vehicles. I jumped out and ran inside, pretending to be on a call, keeping my voice loud and cheerful as if I were meeting someone. I waited near the counter, pretending to browse the candy aisle while stealing glances outside. The sedan had pulled into the lot but had not parked. Instead, it idled near the entrance, the silhouette of the driver barely visible. I forced myself to stay calm. I grabbed a random energy drink from the fridge and walked to the register, pulling out my phone as if I were texting someone my location. I made sure he saw. And then, just like that, he drove off. I stayed in the gas station for another 20 minutes before finally heading home, taking 3 different detours to make sure I was not followed. That night, I slept with a knife under my pillow. I knew, deep in my gut, that this was far from over. The next few days passed in a haze of anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach clenched in fear. Every unfamiliar car parked near my house or work set me on edge. I barely slept, always half listening for the sound of a vehicle outside, always bracing for the nightmare to become reality again. Then, the inevitable happened. It was a slow night at the diner, just me and the cook closing up. I had just taken the trash out to the dumpster when I saw it, the white truck parked across the street, its headlights off, the figure inside barely visible. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. He was watching. Waiting. I turned on my heel and sprinted back inside, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I called my manager, explaining the situation. He told me to stay inside, that he was calling the police. Minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the street. I peered through the blinds, heart hammering, as officers surrounded the truck. A cop knocked on the driver's side window. And then, to my horror, the truck sped off. The officers ran back to their cars and took off after him, sirens wailing into the night. I stood there, trembling, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my fingers ached. It felt surreal. Like a scene from a movie. Like something that happened to other people, not to me. I later found out that the police had lost him in a nearby neighborhood. They took my statement, promising to keep an eye out, but I could see it in their faces, they did not think much would come of it. No crime had been committed, they said. Just suspicious behavior. Nothing they could really act on. I went home that night feeling more helpless than ever. I knew he would come back. He was obsessed, and obsessed people did not just stop. But I refused to be a victim any longer. The next morning, I bought a taser and a can of pepper spray. I enrolled in a self-defense class. I made sure my coworkers walked me to my car every night, and I stopped going anywhere alone after dark. I changed my number. I even moved in with a friend for a while, just in case he had figured out where I lived. Weeks passed, then months. The text stopped. The truck never showed up again. I would love to say I stopped looking over my shoulder, that I stopped waking up in a cold sweat, imagining the sound of footsteps outside my window. But some things stay with you. Some nightmares do not fade with time. I do not know if he gave up or if he found someone else to torment. I do not know if he ever got caught for something worse. All I know is that he changed me. I am not the same person I was before. I do not trust as easily. I do not take safety for granted. I always listen to my gut. And if there is one thing I want you to take away from this, it is this: if someone makes you feel unsafe, trust that feeling. Do not ignore it. Do not dismiss it. Because sometimes, the monsters are real. And sometimes, they are closer than you think.